It was 1792 BC in Babylon. The city, on the brink of becoming the center of the world and one of the best known civilizations in history, had one man at the heart of this transformation who would become a legend: Hammurabi. He not only brought unity to Mesopotamia, a territory that had always been at war, but also established one of the most memorable constitutions in history, known to this day as Hammurabi's Code, the first set of written laws recorded by humankind. But how did Hammurabi change the fate of an entire civilization, and also the history of law, justice, and trials as we know them today? This is what we are going to see in this video. In contrast to other monarchs featured on our channel, Hammurabi was not born into a vast and powerful empire. If anything, Babylon was one of the smallest city-states in the Mesopotamian region. He was the sixth ruler of the first dynasty of Babylon, a kingdom that was still in its early stages. To understand Babylon, we must first get to know the whole region of Mesopotamia. Mesopotamia is a region lying between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. At the time, the Mesopotamian lands were divided between several small protectorates that constantly fought and allied with each other, each with its own ruler. These were Ur, Uruk, Nineveh, Akkad, Babel, and Babylon, the latter lagging behind all the others. When Hammurabi succeeded to the Babylonian throne from his father, Sin-Muballit, in 1792 BC, Babylon was just another of these small realms, and was nowhere near the great power it later turned out to be. Hammurabi was a young king who had just taken power and understood that every move he could make needed to be carefully weighed up, as each minor decision could mean the difference between the survival and destruction of his kingdom. He pondered behind the warfare scenes the need to achieve internal order so that the kingdom would not crumble from within. From the beginning of his reign, he knew that to unify the whole of Mesopotamia and stop being oppressed by rivals, he would need more tools than just brute force. In fact, all of them had raw power. He began to form alliances and cement his power, always with a keen eye for opportunities to expand his domain. Having built many strategies and forged numerous alliances behind the scenes, Hammurabi's opportunity to achieve his conquest arrived. Consider the following scene: an army of thousands of men marching across an open field under the blazing Mesopotamian sun and getting ready for a grueling battle. On his horse, Hammurabi is leading his troops. His objective is crystal clear: to defeat the powerful Rim-Sin, king of Larsa, a region close to Uruk. With its strong fortifications and an experienced army with countless hours of combat experience, Larsa was one of the biggest obstacles to Hammurabi's hegemony. The battle begins. With his wit and strategy, Hammurabi succeeds in upsetting Larsa's defenses. He resorts to besieging tactics, eroding the walls and cutting off supplies from entering the city. After several months of heavy fighting, Rim-Sin's forces are finally routed. Larsa was the capital of the Eastern Larsa Empire. With the former having crumbled, the latter also fell. Hammurabi subsequently added this crucial territory to his empire, which grew a little more each day, steadily consolidating its power and becoming the great influence in southern Mesopotamia. It is unclear when these battles ended, but it is estimated that it was around 1763 BC. Hammurabi then returned to Babylon triumphant, but aware of the challenges he still faced. He started building defensive fortifications and was preparing his army against any potential invasions. Of the many conflicts he was involved in to strengthen his empire at the time, the battle against Zimri-Lim, the last king of Mari, is one of the most striking. Zimri-Lim ruled the city-state of Mari on the banks of the Euphrates and was one of the most powerful regional leaders. But Hammurabi had ambitious plans to expand his territory and reinforce his power. He seized Mari and defeated Zimri-Lim in 1761 BC, further extending his dominion over the Mesopotamian region. Notwithstanding his concern about being attacked and his awareness of how important the walls were, Hammurabi believed that the best way to defend against war was to attack, and he still had great ambitions to carve out a world empire. His aim now was to strike at a coalition basically made up of Assyria, Esnuna, and Elam, powers that stood to the east of the Tigris River. These three kingdoms formed an alliance to block Hammurabi's access to Iran's metal production areas, essential for the war effort. as this steel would be used to forge the weapons used in battle. The battle started, and a few years later, in 1757 BC, Hammurabi ordered his armies to move east for the third time, as Nuna's final destruction during this campaign was a triumph, but also a warning. By wiping out his Nuna, he removed a critical buffer zone between Babylon and the peoples of the east. This was the beginning of what became known as the First Great Babylonian Empire, breaking up several kingdoms and overrunning the whole of Lower Mesopotamia from 1894 BC to 1595 BC. However, this most recent victory, although impressive, left Babylon vulnerable to future invasions and conflicts with tribes that could one day break through. Hammurabi was so alarmed by this that he had no longer focused on conquering new territories and started to strengthen himself internally. He laid out even more emphasis on his building and fortification campaign, believing that every stone laid in the walls was a protection against the coming chaos. By that point, he was already ill and knew he was on the verge of dying. However, until his last breath, Hammurabi wished to keep the results of his conquest alive. Before he died, he left a grand legacy to his people, which became known as the Code of Hammurabi. By the end of his reign, on a massive diorite rock, almost 2 meters high, built right in the middle of Babylon, Hammurabi ordered it to be carved with an insignia of the reign and justice of Marduk, who, according to the local traditions, was Babylon's protector god. Right below this drawing, Hammurabi had 21 columns carved and 282 legal clauses, which became known as the Code of Hammurabi. The laws basically concerned the 3 social classes of the Babylonian Empire. First class, the Awilim, son of man. These were at the top, the elite. The freemen, who earned the highest compensation for offenses, but, of course, also paid the heaviest fines for crimes. Just below them were the Muskanum, free citizens, but with slightly less social prominence and lighter obligations. The bottom of the social pyramid were the Wardum, the slaves. They were not allowed to own property, and the code also talked about trade and family issues, such as divorce, adoption, adultery, and even incest. Hammurabi knew that brute force could conquer lands, but laws would keep them together. And his legal code was not a jumble of discretionary rules. Each law was intended to establish a certain standard of justice for everyone to follow. This was a significant achievement in a society where the prevailing law was usually that of the strongest. When it came to criminal law, Hammurabi did not shy away. The law of talion prevailed. That was what the death penalty was called, whether by burning, hanging, drowning, or impalement. At the time, the idea of proportional justice was widespread. If someone hurt you, the punishment had to be equivalent to the harm. This was an attempt to prevent unrestrained retaliation from destroying society. The law of talion was one of the first attempts to curb revenge and turn it into justice. Let's detail some of these laws. He established a law that dealt with construction and responsibility. If a builder constructs a house and it collapses, killing the owner, the builder will be executed. What if the owner's son dies? Then the builder's son must be killed. The message was clear: do your job well or deal with the consequences. Then there was the law of commercial responsibility, whereby if a merchant sold counterfeit goods, he could be sentenced to death. Hammurabi sought to ensure trust in commercial transactions. Hammurabi was also keen to organize family members and inheritance, in an effort to maintain order and respect within the family. If a son hit his father, the son's hand would be cut off. Hammurabi devised a system that tried to establish a certain order in his empire. During the last years of his reign, Hammurabi encountered internal and external challenges. He needed to focus on building defense fortifications to protect his empire from the growing threats of the East. By this time, he was already sick, and around 1750 BC, Hammurabi died of natural causes, passing the kingdom onto his son, Samsu-iluna, who did not rule like his father. The first dynasty of the Babylonian Empire began to decline, until it was finally plundered by the Hittites in 1595 BC. If you have enjoyed learning more about the history of this key figure in the history of the ancient world, please like the video and subscribe to our channel.